In a world where every gesture is watched, analyzed, and debated by millions, sometimes the smallest acts reveal the biggest truths about character. When 10-year-old Prince George stepped forward at a public event, cameras captured something extraordinary, not a moment of royal protocol gone wrong, but a glimpse into the mind of a young boy choosing his own path toward becoming a gentleman. What happened next would spark conversations in living rooms across the globe about respect, maturity, and the delicate art of growing up in the public eye. This is the true story of a single handshake that said more about dignity and personal choice than any royal decree ever could. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Lambrook School in Berkshire, casting long shadows across the polished floors where Prince George walked with the same careful steps that had been taught to royal children for generations. At 10 years old, he carried himself with a quiet dignity that seemed both natural and carefully cultivated, a product of countless hours spent learning not just mathematics and literature, but the complex art of being royal in the modern world. Prince George Alexander Louis, third in line to the British throne, had always been different from other children, though not in ways most people might expect. While his classmates worried about weekend football matches and homework assignments, George navigated a world where every smile was photographed, every gesture analyzed, and every interaction could potentially make international headlines. Yet on this particular Tuesday morning, none of that seemed to weigh heavily on his young shoulders. His parents, Prince William and Catherine, had worked tirelessly to give their children as normal a childhood as possible within the constraints of royal life. They had chosen Lambrook School specifically for its reputation of treating all children equally, regardless of their background or future responsibilities. Here, George was simply another student in his navy blue uniform, though the discreet security presence and occasional media interest served as constant reminders that his life would never be entirely ordinary. The royal family had always understood that George's education extended far beyond the classroom. From an early age, he had been taught the importance of public service, the weight of tradition, and the delicate balance between personal desires and public duty. Yet his parents had also emphasized something equally important: the value of making his own choices within the framework of respect and kindness. Catherine, in particular, had spent countless hours with her eldest son, discussing the importance of treating everyone with dignity. She had grown up outside the royal family and understood better than most how overwhelming royal protocol could feel to outsiders. Her own experience of learning royal etiquette had taught her that genuine respect mattered more than perfect execution of formal procedures. Prince William, drawing from his own childhood experiences in the public eye, had made it clear to George that being royal meant being responsible for how others felt in their presence. He had shared stories of his own mistakes and triumphs, helping his son understand that even future kings were allowed to be human, to make choices, and to learn from those choices. The conversation that had taken place just 3 days earlier in the family's private sitting room at Adelaide Cottage had been particularly significant. George had asked his mother about an upcoming public event, wondering how he should behave when meeting so many people he didn't know. Catherine had sat beside him on the comfortable sofa, her voice gentle but clear as she explained that good manners weren't about following rules perfectly, but about making others feel comfortable and respected. Sometimes, she had told him, the most polite thing you can do is what feels right in the moment, as long as it comes from a place of kindness and respect. People remember how you made them feel much more than they remember whether you followed every protocol exactly. This conversation had planted a seed in George's mind that would grow over the following days. He found himself thinking more carefully about his interactions, not because he was worried about making mistakes, but because he was beginning to understand the power he had to make others feel valued and respected. The school day proceeded normally, with George participating in his usual classes and activities. His teachers had long since grown accustomed to his presence, treating him with the same expectations and standards as any other student. This consistency had been crucial in helping him develop a sense of normalcy and self-confidence that would serve him well in his future role. During lunch, George sat with his usual group of friends, discussing the upcoming weekend and sharing jokes that had nothing to do with royal duties or public expectations. These moments of ordinary childhood were precious to him, though he was beginning to understand that they would become increasingly rare as he grew older and took on more official responsibilities. As the afternoon wore on, George's thoughts occasionally drifted to the public events scheduled for the following day. It would be a celebration of a local charity's anniversary, and he would be attending alongside his parents to show royal support for the organization's work. He had attended similar events before, but something about this one felt different to him, though he couldn't quite articulate why. The drive home from school was filled with the usual chatter between George and his siblings, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. Catherine listened from the front seat, smiling at their animated discussions about school projects and weekend plans. These car rides had become a cherished time for the family, a brief space where they could simply be parents and children without the formal structure that defined much of their public lives. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner in their private dining room, the conversation naturally turned to the next day's engagement. Prince William explained the charity's mission and the importance of their work in the community, while Catherine added details about the people they would meet and the activities planned for the visit. George listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions that revealed his growing understanding of his role in supporting causes that mattered to people. His questions weren't just about what he was expected to do, but about why the work mattered and how their presence could genuinely help the organization's mission. As bedtime approached, George found himself feeling a mix of anticipation and thoughtfulness about the following day. He had learned to view these public appearances not as obligations but as opportunities to connect with people and support meaningful causes. Yet he was also beginning to develop his own sense of how he wanted to conduct himself in these situations. His mother came to say goodnight, sitting on the edge of his bed as she had done every night since he was very young. Their conversation was brief but meaningful, touching on his thoughts about the next day and his feelings about meeting new people. Catherine's gentle guidance helped him process his thoughts without feeling pressured or overwhelmed. "Remember," she said as she kissed his forehead, "being polite isn't about being perfect. It's about being genuine and kind. Trust your instincts, and always think about how you can make others feel comfortable and respected." As George settled into sleep, his mind was calm but alert, processing the day's lessons and preparing for tomorrow's opportunities. He had no way of knowing that within 24 hours, a simple gesture would capture the attention of people around the world and spark conversations about respect, maturity, and the evolving nature of modern royalty. The foundation for that moment, however, had been laid through years of careful guidance, thoughtful conversations, and a family's commitment to raising a future king who understood that true nobility came not from titles or protocols, but from treating every person with dignity and respect. The stage was set for a lesson in courtesy that would resonate far beyond the walls of a single charity event. The morning of the charity event dawned bright and clear, with autumn sunlight streaming across the grounds of the community center where Hope Haven Charity would celebrate its 25th anniversary. This organization had spent more than 2 decades providing support, education, and resources to families facing difficult circumstances, and today's royal visit would mark a significant milestone in their ongoing mission to serve the community. Hope Haven's director, Sarah Mitchell, had been working tirelessly for weeks to prepare for this special day. A woman in her early 50s with graying hair and kind eyes that reflected years of dedication to helping others, Sarah understood the profound impact that royal attention could have on a small charity's ability to continue and expand their vital work. She had met members of the royal family before, but this would be her first time hosting an event of this magnitude at their humble community center. The building itself was modest but welcoming, with bright murals painted by local children decorating the walls and colorful banners celebrating the charity's anniversary hanging from the ceiling. Volunteers had spent days cleaning, organizing, and preparing displays that would showcase the organization's achievements and ongoing projects. Every corner of the building hummed with excitement and nervous energy as staff members made final preparations. Among the volunteers preparing for the royal visit was 8-year-old Tommy Henderson, an energetic boy with tousled brown hair and an infectious smile that could light up any room. Tommy had been coming to Hope Haven's after-school programs for 3 years, ever since his mother had started working 2 jobs to support their family after his father's unexpected death. The charity had become a second home to him, providing not just homework help and meals, but a community of caring adults and friends who had helped him navigate some of the most difficult years of his young life. Tommy's enthusiasm for the day was infectious. He had been practicing his greeting for weeks, determined to make a good impression on the royal visitors who were coming to celebrate his beloved Hope Haven. His teacher, Mrs. Adams, had worked with him and the other children on proper etiquette, but she had emphasized that the most important thing was to be themselves and show their genuine appreciation for the royal family's interest in their programs. The boy had carefully chosen his outfit for the day: his best jeans, a clean white shirt, and the new sneakers his mother had surprised him with just 2 days earlier. He felt proud and excited, bouncing slightly on his toes as he waited with the other children and volunteers for the royal convoy to arrive. In his mind, he had planned the perfect greeting, complete with a big smile and an enthusiastic high five that he was sure would show just how happy he was to meet a real prince. Meanwhile, across town at Adelaide Cottage, Prince George was going through his own morning preparations. He had awakened feeling alert and focused, his mind already turning to the day's events and the people he would meet. His usual morning routine had included a quiet breakfast with his family, where conversation flowed easily between discussions of the charity's work and lighter topics about school and weekend plans. Catherine had helped George choose his outfit for the day, selecting clothing that was formal enough to show respect for the occasion while remaining age-appropriate and comfortable. They had settled on dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a navy blazer that struck the perfect balance between royal dignity and youthful charm. As they made these preparations together, mother and son had continued their ongoing conversation about the importance of making others feel comfortable and valued during public interactions. Prince William had joined them for a final discussion about the day's schedule and expectations. His approach was characteristically thoughtful and practical, helping George understand not just what would happen, but why each element of the visit mattered to the charity and the community they served. He emphasized that their presence was meaningful not because of their titles, but because it brought attention and support to important work that might otherwise go unnoticed. The family's departure from Adelaide Cottage was smooth and well-coordinated, with security arrangements that had been planned meticulously to ensure both safety and minimal disruption to the community. As their convoy made its way through the countryside toward the community center, George found himself looking out the window at the familiar landscape, feeling a growing sense of anticipation about the people he would meet and the stories he would hear. Catherine used the drive time to share more details about Hope Haven's work, describing some of the specific programs they supported and the families they had helped over the years. Her enthusiasm for the charity's mission was genuine and infectious, helping George understand that this wasn't just another obligation but an opportunity to connect with people doing meaningful work in their community. The conversation in the car was relaxed and natural, with all three family members contributing thoughts and questions about the day ahead. This easy communication had always been a hallmark of their family dynamic, creating an environment where George felt comfortable expressing his thoughts and concerns without fear of judgment or criticism. As they neared their destination, George could see the community center in the distance, decorated with colorful banners and surrounded by a small but enthusiastic crowd of supporters, volunteers, and local residents who had gathered to witness this special occasion. The sight filled him with a warm feeling of anticipation and purpose that had become familiar over his years of participating in public engagements. Inside the community center, Sarah Mitchell was conducting final checks with her staff, ensuring that everything was ready for the royal arrival. She had briefed her volunteers on the schedule for the day, emphasizing the importance of being natural and genuine while also showing appropriate respect for their royal guests. Her years of experience in community work had taught her that the most successful events were those where everyone felt comfortable being themselves. Tommy Henderson was practically vibrating with excitement as he stood with the other children in the greeting line. His friend Maria, a shy 9-year-old girl who had initially been nervous about meeting royalty, found herself caught up in Tommy's enthusiasm and began to feel excited rather than anxious. The children had been told they would have a chance to meet Prince George personally, and Tommy had spent considerable time imagining how wonderful it would be to give the young prince a high five, just like he might greet any new friend at school. The volunteers and staff members shared Tommy's excitement, though theirs was tempered with the professional awareness of how much this visit could mean for their charity's future. Many of them had worked with Hope Haven for years, watching the organization grow and evolve while always operating on limited resources and depending heavily on community support. A successful royal visit could bring media attention, donor interest, and public awareness that would help them expand their programs and reach more families in need. As the appointed time approached, Sarah Mitchell gathered her team for a final moment of preparation. She reminded them that while protocols were important, the most crucial element of the day was showing their royal guests the genuine warmth and community spirit that made Hope Haven special. Her words helped calm any remaining nerves and reinforced the sense of pride that everyone felt about showcasing their important work. The sound of approaching vehicles could be heard in the distance, and a ripple of excitement passed through the gathering crowd. Children pressed closer to the windows, volunteers checked their name tags one final time, and Sarah Mitchell took a deep breath, knowing that the next few hours would be pivotal for her organization's future. Prince George, sitting in the approaching car with his parents, felt his own surge of anticipation as they turned into the community center's driveway. He could see the bright decorations, the smiling faces pressed against windows, and the careful preparations that had clearly been made in honor of their visit. The genuine enthusiasm visible in every detail reinforced his understanding of how meaningful their presence could be to organizations like Hope Haven. As the convoy came to a stop and the doors prepared to open, two very different but equally sincere young people were about to meet in a moment that would demonstrate the power of respectful communication and the beauty of making choices based on kindness rather than expectation. The stage was perfectly set for a lesson in courtesy that would resonate far beyond the walls of one small community center. The black sedan came to a gentle stop outside the Hope Haven Community Center, and Prince George could feel the familiar flutter of anticipation that always preceded public engagements. Through the car window, he could see the carefully arranged welcome committee standing in a neat line, their faces bright with excitement and nervous energy. The autumn sun cast everything in a warm, golden light that made the colorful decorations and eager expressions seem even more vibrant and welcoming. Prince William was the first to step out of the vehicle, his tall frame immediately recognizable to the gathered crowd. A small cheer went up from the supporters who had lined the pathway, and he acknowledged them with his characteristic wave and warm smile. Catherine followed, her elegant appearance and genuine warmth immediately putting the nervous volunteers at ease as she walked toward the entrance with graceful confidence. Prince George emerged last, and the sight of the young royal caused an even louder cheer from the children who had been waiting patiently behind the safety barriers. He paused for a moment, taking in the scene before him with the careful observation that had become second nature during his years of public appearances. His eyes swept across the welcoming committee, the decorations, and the excited faces of the children and adults who had gathered to meet them. Sarah Mitchell stepped forward to greet the royal family, her professional composure barely containing her excitement at hosting such distinguished guests at her beloved charity. Her handshake with Prince William was firm and confident, her greeting to Catherine warm and genuine, and, when she turned to George, her smile was particularly bright with the special affection that adults often reserved for children who carried themselves with unusual dignity and grace. "Your Royal Highness," she said to George, extending her hand with a slight curtsy that was respectful without being overly formal. "Welcome to Hope Haven. We're absolutely delighted to have you here with us today." George shook her hand with the same careful attention he gave all his interactions, his response polite and genuinely interested. "Thank you for inviting us, Mrs. Mitchell. I'm looking forward to learning more about the wonderful work you do here." The formal introductions continued as Sarah led the royal family along the line of staff members and key volunteers, each person having been carefully briefed on proper protocol while being encouraged to be themselves during these precious few moments of interaction. The atmosphere was warm and welcoming, with nervous laughter and excited whispers creating a backdrop of genuine community enthusiasm. As they moved through the receiving line, George found himself genuinely engaged by the stories people shared about their work with Hope Haven. A volunteer grandmother spoke about the reading program she led for struggling students. A teenage volunteer described how the charity had helped her family during a difficult period and how she now wanted to give back. Each conversation was brief but meaningful, giving George insight into the real impact of the organization's work. The tour of the facilities began in the main activity room, where displays had been set up to showcase Hope Haven's various programs. Catherine was particularly interested in the educational support initiatives, asking detailed questions about how they identified children who needed extra help and what methods had proven most effective. Prince William gravitated toward the job training and family support programs, drawing connections to similar initiatives he had encountered in his own charitable work. George listened carefully to these conversations, but his attention was also drawn to the children who were participating in the day's activities. He could see their excitement at having royal visitors, but he also noticed how comfortable they seemed in this space, how clearly it served as a safe and welcoming second home for many of them. This observation reinforced his understanding of why places like Hope Haven mattered so much to the communities they served. The highlight of the visit was scheduled to be an interaction with the children who regularly participated in Hope Haven's after-school programs. They had been gathered in the arts and crafts room, where they had prepared a special presentation showcasing some of their recent projects and sharing stories about what the charity meant to them. The room buzzed with excitement as the royal family entered, with 20 eager young faces turning toward their distinguished guests. Tommy Henderson stood near the front of the group, his enthusiasm barely contained as he waited for his turn to meet Prince George. He had been chosen, along with several other children, to personally greet the young royal and share a brief story about his experience at Hope Haven. His prepared speech was memorized perfectly, but his real focus was on the moment when he would get to give Prince George the enthusiastic high five he had been planning for weeks. The presentations began with Maria, the shy 9-year-old who had overcome her initial nervousness and now spoke confidently about how Hope Haven's tutoring program had helped her improve her reading skills. Her transformation from anxious to confident over the course of the morning was visible to everyone in the room, and her story clearly moved both Catherine and Prince William. George listened intently to each child's story, asking thoughtful questions and offering genuine words of encouragement. His interactions were natural and age-appropriate, reflecting both his royal training and his own authentic interest in connecting with his peers. The other children responded to his warmth and sincerity, gradually relaxing and sharing more personal details about their experiences. As the presentations continued, Tommy's turn approached, and his excitement became increasingly difficult to contain. He bounced slightly on his toes, his prepared speech running through his mind one final time, his right hand unconsciously practicing the motion for the perfect high five he planned to share with Prince George. In his mind, this gesture would be the perfect expression of friendship and enthusiasm, a way to show the prince that he was genuinely happy to meet him. When Sarah Mitchell called Tommy's name, he stepped forward with a huge smile and began his prepared presentation about Hope Haven's sports program and how it had helped him make friends and stay active after school. His words were clear and enthusiastic, his story engaging and heartfelt. George listened with obvious interest, asking follow-up questions that showed he understood how meaningful these programs could be for children who might not have access to organized activities otherwise. As Tommy concluded his presentation, he felt the moment he had been anticipating finally arrive. This was when he would offer his friendly high five to Prince George, completing what he imagined would be a perfect interaction between two boys who just happened to have very different backgrounds. His smile widened, his hand began to rise, and his whole being radiated the pure joy and excitement that had been building throughout the morning. But, in that crucial moment, Prince George made a choice that would surprise everyone in the room and capture the attention of people around the world. Instead of responding to Tommy's raised hand with the expected high five, the young prince paused, seemed to consider the situation carefully, and then extended his own hand in the gesture for a formal handshake. His movement was deliberate and respectful, his expression serious but kind. The room fell silent for just a moment as everyone processed this unexpected development. Tommy, his hand still raised for the anticipated high five, looked confused and slightly disappointed. The adults in the room held their breath, uncertain how this interaction would unfold and whether Tommy might feel rejected or hurt by the deviation from his expected greeting. But Prince George's next words and actions would transform this potentially awkward moment into something beautiful and meaningful. With his hand still extended for the handshake, he looked directly into Tommy's eyes and spoke with a sincerity and maturity that seemed far beyond his 10 years. "I'd like to shake your hand, Tommy," George said, his voice clear and respectful. "I think you're doing amazing work here at Hope Haven, and I want to thank you properly for sharing your story with me." The formality of his words was softened by the genuine warmth in his tone and the respectful way he maintained eye contact with the younger boy. His gesture wasn't a rejection of Tommy's friendship or enthusiasm, but rather an offering of a different kind of respect, one that acknowledged the importance of their interaction and the dignity that both boys deserved in that moment. Tommy's confusion lasted only a few seconds before he recognized the sincerity and kindness in Prince George's approach. His raised hand lowered to meet George's extended hand, and their handshake was firm and meaningful, lasting just long enough to acknowledge the mutual respect that had been established between them. Tommy's smile returned, perhaps not quite as exuberant as before, but deeper and more thoughtful. The cameras that had been documenting the visit captured this entire exchange, though none of the participants were thinking about photography in that moment. They were all focused on the remarkable demonstration of courtesy, respect, and mature decision-making that they had just witnessed from a 10-year-old boy who was learning to navigate the complex responsibilities of his future role while maintaining his own sense of authentic kindness. The handshake between Prince George and Tommy Henderson lasted only a few seconds, but its impact rippled through the room immediately. The adults present recognized they had just witnessed something significant, though the full meaning of the moment would take time to process and understand. Sarah Mitchell felt a warm surge of pride, not just for the respectful way Prince George had handled the interaction, but for how Tommy had responded with such grace to the unexpected change in their planned greeting. Catherine watched the exchange with particular interest, recognizing in her son's behavior the lessons they had discussed about making thoughtful choices in the moment. She could see that George had not rejected Tommy's enthusiasm or friendliness, but had instead chosen a form of greeting that felt more appropriate to him for reasons that were probably complex even in his own young mind. Her pride in his decision-making was tempered by concern for how Tommy might be feeling about the deviation from his expected high five. Prince William also observed the interaction with keen attention, understanding that these moments of choice and adaptation were crucial elements in his son's development as a future royal. He had learned through his own experience that public interactions often required split-second decisions about how to balance personal comfort, protocol, and genuine connection with others. Seeing George navigate such a decision independently, while maintaining kindness and respect, reassured him that their approach to raising their children was producing the desired results. Tommy, meanwhile, was processing his own complex emotions about the handshake. His initial disappointment at not receiving the high five he had planned was quickly replaced by a different but equally positive feeling. There was something special about the way Prince George had looked at him during their handshake, something that made him feel respected and valued in a way he had never experienced before. The formality of the gesture somehow made their interaction feel more important, more meaningful than a casual high five might have been. The other children in the room watched this exchange with fascination, learning their own lessons about different ways of showing respect and friendship. Maria, who had been nervous about meeting royalty at the beginning of the day, found herself thinking that Prince George's choice to shake hands seemed very grown-up and appropriate. Several of the older children nodded approvingly, recognizing that there were different ways to show appreciation and connection depending on the circumstances. As the moment concluded and the presentations continued, George found himself reflecting on his choice to offer a handshake instead of responding to Tommy's high five. He wasn't entirely sure why he had made that decision in the moment, but it had felt right to him. Something about the setting, the formality of the visit, and his respect for Tommy's story had made a handshake seem like the more appropriate response. He was pleased to see that Tommy had understood and accepted his choice with such good grace. The remainder of the visit continued smoothly, with the royal family touring Hope Haven's other facilities and meeting with more volunteers and staff members. Each interaction built upon the foundation established by that first meaningful exchange, with George continuing to demonstrate the thoughtful approach to public engagement that had characterized his handshake with Tommy. His conversations with other children and adults were warm and genuine, but consistently maintained the respectful tone he had established from the beginning. During the tour of Hope Haven's kitchen facilities, where volunteers prepared meals for families in need, George asked detailed questions about how they determined which families required assistance and how they ensured the meals were nutritious and appealing. His questions revealed both curiosity about the practical aspects of charity work and genuine concern for the people being served. The kitchen volunteers were impressed by his maturity and his apparent understanding of the real impact their work had on community members. Catherine spent considerable time in conversation with Hope Haven's educational coordinators, learning about their innovative approaches to helping children who struggled in traditional school settings. Her background in early childhood development made these conversations particularly meaningful to her, and she was able to offer insights and suggestions based on her own experience and research. The easy flow of professional conversation demonstrated her genuine expertise and commitment to causes involving children's welfare. Prince William connected strongly with the volunteers who worked on Hope Haven's family support programs, sharing insights from his own charitable work and asking thoughtful questions about the challenges they faced in reaching families who might be reluctant to seek help. His military background and his work with various veteran and family support organizations gave him a unique perspective on the complexities of providing effective assistance to people in difficult circumstances. Throughout these interactions, the staff and volunteers at Hope Haven were struck by how genuine and engaged all three royal family members seemed to be. This wasn't just a ceremonial visit where they would smile politely and move on quickly. Instead, they were having real conversations, asking meaningful questions, and demonstrating authentic interest in the organization's work and the people it served. The photography team that had been documenting the visit captured numerous images of these interactions, but it was the earlier handshake between George and Tommy that had created the most compelling visual story. The photograph showed two young boys connecting across different backgrounds and circumstances, with Prince George's respectful gesture demonstrating a maturity and consideration that spoke to his developing character and the values being instilled in him by his parents. As the official visit portion of the day concluded, Sarah Mitchell gathered her team and the participating children for a group photograph with the royal family. This final image would become treasured memorabilia for Hope Haven, representing not just the honor of a royal visit but the genuine connections that had been forged during the morning. Tommy stood proudly in the front row, his smile bright and confident as he posed next to Prince George, their earlier handshake having created a bond of mutual respect that was visible in their comfortable interaction. The royal family's departure was marked by the same warmth and enthusiasm that had characterized their arrival, but with an added depth that reflected the meaningful connections made during their visit. As they walked back toward their waiting vehicle, George found himself thinking about the people he had met and the stories he had heard. The experience had reinforced his understanding of why these visits mattered and how his presence could genuinely impact organizations doing important work in their communities. Tommy watched from the community center window as the royal convoy prepared to leave, his feelings about the day complex but overwhelmingly positive. The handshake with Prince George had become a highlight of the experience, not because it was what he had originally planned, but because it had felt special and meaningful in a way he was still trying to understand. He would remember the respectful way Prince George had looked at him during their greeting, the firm grip of their handshake, and the sense that he had been seen and valued as an individual worthy of genuine attention and respect. The other children gathered around Tommy, all talking excitedly about their own interactions with the royal family and sharing their observations about the visit. Several of them mentioned how impressed they had been by Prince George's polite and thoughtful behavior, with Maria noting specifically how nice it had been that he shook hands with Tommy instead of just giving a quick high five. Her comments sparked a discussion among the children about different ways of showing respect and how sometimes the more formal approach could actually feel more special and meaningful. Sarah Mitchell spent the afternoon debriefing with her staff about the visit, analyzing what had gone well and what lessons they could take from the experience for future events. The consensus was overwhelmingly positive, with particular praise for how naturally and genuinely the royal family had engaged with their mission and their people. The handshake between Prince George and Tommy was mentioned multiple times as an example of the thoughtful and respectful approach that had characterized the entire visit. As evening approached and the excitement of the day began to settle into satisfied reflection, the true significance of Prince George's choice to offer a handshake instead of a high five was beginning to emerge. It had been a small gesture in many ways, lasting only a few seconds and involving just two young people. Yet it had demonstrated important lessons about respect, appropriate behavior, and the power of making thoughtful choices even in unexpected moments. The story of that handshake would soon spread far beyond the walls of Hope Haven Community Center, capturing the imagination of people around the world who recognized in Prince George's behavior a glimpse of the kind of leader he might become. But, for now, it remained a cherished memory for everyone who had been present, a perfect example of how genuine courtesy and respect could create meaningful connections between people from very different backgrounds and circumstances. Within hours of the royal family's departure from Hope Haven Community Center, the photographs and video footage from their visit began circulating through news outlets and social media platforms around the world. Among all the images captured that day, one particular photograph stood out with remarkable clarity and impact: the moment when Prince George extended his hand to shake Tommy Henderson's hand instead of responding to the boy's offered high five. The image was striking in its simplicity and profound in its implications. Two young boys, one destined to be king and another from a working-class family, connected through a gesture that demonstrated respect, maturity, and thoughtful consideration. The photographer who captured the moment later described it as one of those rare instances when a single image seemed to tell a complete story about character, values, and the possibility of meaningful connection across social boundaries. Social media erupted with discussions about the photograph almost immediately. Parents shared the image with comments about teaching their own children about different ways to show respect and consideration for others. Educators used it as an example of how young people could demonstrate maturity and thoughtfulness in their interactions. Royal watchers analyzed every aspect of Prince George's body language and expression, finding in his choice a reflection of his careful upbringing and developing sense of appropriate behavior. The hashtag Royal Handshake began trending within 12 hours of the photo's release, with thousands of people sharing their own thoughts about the significance of Prince George's gesture. Many commenters noted how the handshake seemed more formal and respectful than a casual high-five would have been, suggesting that the young prince understood the importance of the moment and chose to honor it with a more dignified greeting. International news outlets picked up the story with headlines that ranged from "Young Prince shows remarkable maturity in charity visit" to "The handshake that taught the world about respect." Television news programs featured the story prominently, often inviting child development experts and royal commentators to analyze what the interaction revealed about Prince George's character and his preparation for future royal responsibilities. Dr. Amanda Phillips, a child psychologist frequently consulted by major news networks, offered her perspective on the significance of the moment during a morning television appearance. "What we see here is a young person making an independent choice about how to interact respectfully with another child," she explained. Prince George wasn't following a script or responding automatically. He paused, considered the situation, and chose what felt most appropriate to him in that moment. That kind of thoughtful decision-making is remarkable in a 10-year-old. Royal historian Professor James Whitfield provided additional context during his interview with a prominent newspaper. "This interaction demonstrates the evolution of modern royalty," he noted. "Prince George is being raised to understand that respect and dignity don't require distance or coldness." His handshake with Tommy was formal yet warm, appropriate yet genuine. It shows a young person learning to balance traditional royal behavior with authentic human connection. The international reaction was equally positive, with news outlets from Australia to Canada to Japan featuring the story prominently. Many foreign journalists noted how Prince George's behavior reflected well on the British royal family's approach to raising the next generation of royals. The handshake was seen as evidence that the young prince was being taught to think independently while maintaining respect for others and appropriate behavior in public settings. Tommy Henderson suddenly found himself at the center of international attention, though his family and Hope Haven worked carefully to protect his privacy while allowing him to share his perspective on the experience. In a brief interview with a local newspaper, Tommy expressed his positive feelings about the interaction. "Prince George was really nice and polite. The handshake felt special, like he really wanted to meet me properly. It was better than a high five because it felt more important." Tommy's mother, Lisa Henderson, spoke proudly about her son's experience and his graceful handling of the unexpected greeting. "Tommy had practiced his high five for weeks," she shared with journalists. "But he understood immediately that Prince George was offering him something even better, a sign of real respect. He came home talking about how grown-up it made him feel to shake hands like that." The story resonated particularly strongly with parents around the world, many of whom began discussing with their own children the different ways to show respect and appreciation when meeting new people. Parenting blogs and magazines featured articles about teaching children to read social cues and adapt their behavior appropriately to different situations, using Prince George's handshake as a positive example of flexibility and consideration. Educational institutions also took notice of the story's teaching potential. Several schools incorporated the incident into their lessons about respect, courtesy, and cultural awareness. Teachers used the photograph to start discussions about how different gestures and greetings could convey different levels of formality and respect, helping students understand that there were many appropriate ways to connect with others. Hope Haven Community Center experienced an unexpected windfall as a result of the global attention. Donations poured in from around the world, with many contributors specifically mentioning that they had been inspired to give by the positive coverage of Prince George's visit and the respectful interaction between the two boys. Sarah Mitchell found herself fielding interview requests from international media while also managing a dramatic increase in volunteer applications and partnership inquiries. "We never imagined that a simple handshake could bring so much positive attention to our work," Sarah reflected during one of her many interviews that week. But it really demonstrated the values we try to teach here at Hope Haven: respect, kindness, and the understanding that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their background. The royal family maintained their characteristic discretion about the global reaction to the photograph, but palace sources indicated that Prince William and Catherine were pleased with the positive reception of their son's behavior. The incident was seen as validation of their approach to raising their children with strong values while preparing them for their future roles in public life. Behind the scenes, the photograph became a topic of discussion among royal staff and advisors, who recognized it as an example of how Prince George was developing his own sense of appropriate behavior rather than simply following predetermined scripts. This independence of thought, combined with clear respect for others, was seen as an encouraging sign for his future development as a public figure. Child development experts continued to analyze the incident in academic and professional contexts, often using it as a case study in how children learn to navigate complex social situations. The fact that Prince George had made his choice spontaneously, without apparent guidance from adults in the moment, was seen as particularly significant evidence of his developing emotional intelligence and social awareness. Several months after the original incident, the photograph was selected for inclusion in a museum exhibition about modern royal history, with curators noting its significance as a representation of how the younger generation of royals was being prepared for public service in the 21st century. The image was displayed alongside historical photographs of royal children from previous generations, illustrating the evolution of royal childhood and public engagement over time. Tommy Henderson kept a framed copy of the photograph in his bedroom, where it served as a constant reminder of the day he met a future king and learned important lessons about respect and dignity. His experience at Hope Haven continued to be positive, but he often spoke about how the handshake with Prince George had made him think more carefully about how he greeted and interacted with other people in his daily life. The lasting impact of the handshake extended far beyond the initial media coverage and social media discussions. It became a reference point for conversations about respect, appropriate behavior, and the importance of making thoughtful choices in social interactions. Parents cited it when teaching their children about flexibility and consideration. Teachers used it to illustrate lessons about cultural awareness and emotional intelligence. Social commentators referenced it when discussing the evolution of courtesy and respect in modern society. Years later, when Tommy Henderson had grown into a confident young man and Prince George had taken on more official royal responsibilities, both would remember that handshake as a significant moment in their development. For Tommy, it represented a lesson in the power of respect and dignity that had influenced his interactions with others throughout his life. For Prince George, it marked an early example of his ability to make independent, thoughtful choices that honored both tradition and genuine human connection. The photograph remained a powerful symbol of the possibility for meaningful interaction across social boundaries, demonstrating that respect and courtesy could create genuine connections between people from vastly different backgrounds. It stood as a testament to the values that both families had worked to instill in their sons, and to the universal human capacity for kindness, consideration, and mutual respect. In the end, what began as a simple charity visit became a moment that captured global attention and sparked important conversations about how young people can demonstrate maturity, respect, and thoughtful decision-making in their daily interactions. The handshake between Prince George and Tommy Henderson proved that sometimes the smallest gestures can carry the most profound meanings, and that true courtesy lies not in following prescribed formulas but in making choices that honor the dignity and worth of every individual we encounter.